watching Business World Live here on One News. I'm Jess De Los Santos. Let's take a look at how the local bourse closed today, Thursday. All right, you have Philippine shares joining the rise among most gauges in Asia here. This is traders are more bullish that global recovery can stand against the Omicron variant of COVID-19. That's on the back of Pfizer and BioNTech bearing. That studies show that a third dose of their jab might be effective in neutralizing Omicron. They're expecting more concrete data by the end of the year. That has reassured most traders in Asian stocks here, including the Philippines, which saw the benchmark rising by close to percent, a quarter of a percent. Sorry, with the benchmark rising close to 1.23% for today. This has been the benchmark has been in the green for the past five sessions here, trading steadily above 7,000 after that drop to 6,900. Investors picking up travel and tourism stocks following that development from Pfizer. Over here, you'd see Bloomberry, as represented by the white line, increasing by as much as 4.2%, ending the session at 7 pesos and 19 centavos a share. Likewise, you have Cebu Pacific gaining more than 4% here, ending the session at 44 pesos and 80 centavos a piece. This is a country also sees the number of returning Filipinos reaching pre-pandemic levels later this month. We'll try to give you more details on that later in the program. Here are other headlines we're keeping our eyes on. The Health Department reports that the Omicron variant has not been detected in the latest round of genome sequencing involving 48 samples. The latest sequencing run was composed of samples from 12 returning overseas Filipinos and 36 local cases from high-risk areas. Out of the total samples, 38 are Delta variant cases. Now, if cases continue to dive and if variants will not cause further outbreaks, Health Secretary Francisco Duque says COVID-19 could possibly become an endemic by next, or could possibly be endemic by next year. This means the virus is only confined in certain areas of the country and is no longer widespread. However, a medical expert cautioned against the use of the term endemic as early as now, saying this could lead the public to become complacent. Dr. Ray Salinel of the Hospital ng Maynila tells the big story that it's still not the right time for experts to make projections of an endemic situation. This as the country has yet to reach herd immunity. Now, Philippine Airlines says the emergence of the Omicron variant overseas has no effect on its operations so far. In today's Laging Handa briefing, PAL spokesperson Shelo Villaluna says the airline sector is continuously seeing signs of recovery, but she admits they're still far from reaching pre-pandemic levels. Villaluna notes that PAL's current flights are only at 40% of pre-pandemic operations, where they reach at least 300 flights a day. But on the bright side, Villanueva, or Villaluna rather, says they are seeing improvements in domestic operations due to a travel surge to certain destinations. Despite this, PAL says it's not yet capable of rehiring workers that were laid off due to the health crisis. And the Education Department says it will conclude its pilot implementation of limited face-to-face classes this month. Secretary Leonor Briones says this move will make way for assessments that will determine whether face-to-face classes can officially be rolled out in more areas. The agency considers the pilot run a success, as there were no students infected since November 15 in all 165 participating schools. Briones says they are now eyeing to expand the implementation of in-person classes in more urbanized areas like those in Calabarzon and NCR. Limited in-person classes in Metro Manila began Monday this week, December 6. Should more face-to-face classes be rolled out in the country? What's this going to mean for digital adoption in the education sector? Let's get thoughts from a global learning tech firm, D2L. with Nick Hutton, their Regional Director for Asia. Good afternoon, Nick. Thank you for joining us today.
Good afternoon, Jess. Thank you very much for inviting me.
All right, so the Philippines has held physical classes for a very long time. In fact, one of the longest in the world. How exactly did that impact the educational system here in the Philippines?
Well, I think it actually created, when you talk about digital transformation and using education technology in the classroom just generally, I think it created a little bit of an evolution, and that's probably on two counts. You know, the forced move to video delivery technology, so using what are called virtual classrooms to deliver the lecture, deliver the class using video. When institutions closed their doors and went remote, has actually introduced technology to many who hadn't used it before. And for those who already had some kind of education technology in their institution, typically a learning management system, and typically they were only using it before the pandemic to manage content, to manage courses, to manage their own content. They realized through the remote use of the technology that there's more to education technology, there's more to a learning management system than just managing content. So I think it's had an incredibly positive effect as far as transforming education from a digital perspective, given that the Philippines before the pandemic was a lot less digital savvy in terms of using it in the classroom.
But that transformation did not come without challenges. So what would you say were the main holdups here in making that shift?
I think there were a couple that came to light very quickly, not only in the Philippines, but in a number of countries around the Asia region that were not, if you like, mature in the use of education technology. We saw, as you know, some challenges in terms of enrollments and dropout rates. I mean, that was certainly a problem, and it was made worse by the fact that, you know, across many parts of the Philippines today, there's what I would call spotty internet access, and in many cases a lack of access to devices to be able to receive the classes by the students. I think there was a lacking in terms of remote learning readiness, as we would call it, which is natural, I guess. In the survey that we did of higher education educators in the Philippines, something like 4 in 10 respondents, so 40%, who took steps to ensure educational continuity during national lockdowns, reported that they found the change somewhat or very, very difficult to do. And then, of course, digital adoption. So almost 48% of all institutions with a digital transformation strategy that they had to develop as part of the lockdowns and the move to remoteness cited, as I mentioned just now, student access to the internet and access to devices as a major obstacle to any kind of transformation to digital as a result of the pandemic.
Okay, given that, would you say then, I mean, on one hand, the transition to remote learning has accelerated digital adoption in the educational sector, but on one hand, like what you mentioned earlier, readiness for online learning has been quite a challenge, especially for students and even faculty. Given that, would you say then that the return to physical classes, is it going to be a boon or a bane?
So you said the return to physical classes?
Yes, exactly.
Obviously, it's going to be a boon. If you've got challenges in terms of access to the internet, you've got challenges in terms of access to devices, then getting back into physical classrooms face to face where you were originally is obviously going to be beneficial. But I think what is going to be even more beneficial is the fact that many institutions have had to touch technology. And now what they can do is they can take that experience, that knowledge that they've been forced to learn, and then use it to support their face-to-face classes. You know, the benefit of a good education technology platform, a good learning management system, is not just for online delivery. It's very much in what we call a blended format, where you have the flexibility to do work outside of the classroom, to access activities and tools and everything outside of the classroom, but at the same time, it supports the teacher or the faculty in the classroom. It makes the teacher more effective and more efficient in the way they deliver their teaching and learning, and gives them an ability to enhance their pedagogical styles that they're using in their particular teaching. So I think in answer to your question, obviously it's got to be a boon to go back to class, but the second boon, if you like, is the fact that we've got a lot of experience now in the use of digital technology in a learning environment.
Now, given that as well, what then do you think should be the roadmap here for the educational sector in the Philippines, especially when it comes to educational technology?
Well, I think, one of there is as I mentioned earlier on, the survey that we did with the Times Higher Education in the Philippines at higher education level to educators. One of the interesting factors that came out of that was that the group that's most likely to be driving change at institutions with a digital transformation strategy is the faculty.
Mm-hmm.
So 57% of our respondents basically said it's the faculty who are going to be driving change. Now, that's great, but that's also a challenge, because in answer to your question about the roadmap, as far as I'm concerned, sits very much around faculty. It sits around faculty adoption. It sits around the ability for faculty to be trained correctly, and also in what I would call change management. Because when you're moving and don't forget, delivering a lecture using technology in a remote environment is the same as standing up in front of a class. All you're doing is standing up in front of a camera. That's the difference. So you're not actually using any of the technology tools to enhance the way you're delivering. So the key really is that you create a level of understanding and knowledge with the faculty as to how the tools inside a technology, education technology platform, or an LMS, a learning management system, how those tools can enhance the delivery of their teaching and learning, support their pedagogical styles, and enable them to create the best learning paths for their students using those tools to get them obviously to the best possible outcomes. So to me, the largest part of driving that roadmap, driving the change that's already started, sits around how we manage to get the faculty to adopt the benefits of the technology in the future.
All right, here's to hoping, of course, that the key positive takeaways from that transition to remote learning will be carried over as schools return to face-to-face classes. Thank you very much for your insights and your time this afternoon. Nick Hutton, the Regional Director for Asia over at D2L. Thank you, Nick.
Thanks, Jess.
And those are the biggest stories of this trading day, December 9, 2021. Catch Businessworld live again tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. for the market open and 3:15 p.m. for the market close. I'm Jess De Los Santos. We are One News. Mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines.